Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 20, no, wait, what date is it? October 14th, 2021 live dev stream for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. I am one of your hosts and one of your producers, Ben Dean, and with me, as always, is Chris Joppa Perkins, creative director, lead designer. How are you doing today, Chris?
Doing great. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. And via internet sorcery, we also have two other people with us today. We have lead programmer Kyle Olson and senior programmer Robert Crane. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey, guys.
So Ronik, before we get started, Ronik sends his regrets. He won't be able to make it today. He is out practicing his fishing skill. So tonight, on tonight's show, we're going to talk about the HDRP or high definition render pipeline, and we're going to talk about the tools. We're going to talk about where we are, the whole project conversion. We've got the right people on the stream tonight to talk about that and to give us a little bit of insight as to what it is and how it's working and how it's shaping up. So before we begin, though, we just wanted to send a quick shout out to our current pledgers who have made Pantheon possible as of today, up until this date. So we wanted to send a quick thank you to all of you who have showed your support over the years. And we did want to also mention that if you are a Pantheon fan and if you do like what you see tonight or any other night, feel free to drop on by pantheonmmo.com and click on that pledge button. Lots of pledges available there for any budget, any kind of gamer. Check them out, see if there's anything there that catches your fancy. So without further ado, we will turn things over to you, Chris. Let's talk about the high-def render pipeline and what we're going to see tonight.
Speaking of catching someone's fancy, this stream is one I've been excited about for a very long time. And if you've been following our development, you know that we've been mentioning this in our recent newsletters, that this is a very significant milestone for us. So we're super excited to dive in, super excited to go over everything and start setting the stage for this new era that we've entered into. For those of you that don't know, the HDRP pipeline stands for the high definition render pipeline that we're going to be kind of breaking down tonight and explaining what that means and how it benefits the game, how it benefits the performance of the game, really taking just about everything to the next level when it comes to our terrain tech and really just our streaming tech in general. We'll get into more details on that shortly. But in the most simplest terms, what this means is we finally reached the point where we are able to start transitioning our world away from the gray box development that we've been in for some time now and actually move into real terrain. And it's a very significant time. But what's exciting about tonight is breaking down more than just that specifically, but also all of the additional gains that we've been able to make, what it means for performance, what it means for future proofing, and all of the bells and whistles that come with that. So this is a part one of a two-part series on our HDRP pipeline and the conversion process. This stream is focused more so on kind of the tech and the tools that have been developed and that we're utilizing. There will be some nice visuals that we incorporate in tonight as well to demonstrate those things, to show progress, and to leave a good taste of things to come. And then our part two series will be focused on the beautification and, looking at more of kind of the product of everything from more of a finished kind of release ready state, if you will. So two-part series, and again, couldn't be more excited. Before we dive into the nuts and bolts, I do want to just again kind of introduce Kyle and Rob. We've had them on before in different ways. I know their voice has been out there before, but just got to take my proverbial hat off to these two gentlemen. They are absolutely phenomenal programmers. They are incredible to work with, extremely supportive, communicative, passionate about what we're doing. And I'm humbled by just the amount of effort and time and sincere devotion that these two have to the project and everything that's gone into what they've done. So I think that'll speak for itself tonight as you see the fruit of a lot of their labor. So let's go ahead and dive in. I think we're going to start with kind of the fundamental architecture changes, and this is going to give an opportunity for you to kind of get your voices into the mix. But let's start there. And for those who don't know what architecture means, how might we kick things off by explaining what that is, how that's changed?
Yeah, so previously we were relying on Unity's scene systems to house all of our zones for the most part, which meant that a designer opens up a scene, drags stuff in there, hits save, that goes to disk, and then we can load that entire scene. It's kind of a rigid process. You don't get a lot of control over that. I can't take Thrown Fast and load only the lowest quality LOD for the zone, let's say. So if I wanted to support a lower spec PC, it's not so easy to do that. Not to mention, it's just one big load request off of your disk. You can't customize or mix and match or share things between scenes as easily. You're sort of locked in with Unity's own technology there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, you can think of a scene like what's a good analogy for a scene?
It's a
Basically-
bundle of data. It's
Yeah.
it's an idea. All of the ideas that you want to fit into Thrown Fast sort of get bundled together and saved into one blob on the computer, and that's Unity calls that a scene file.
It's also very difficult to strip the difference between the client and the server. So we're getting a lot of server bloat
Exactly.
when it come to our scene files because of the way it was organized. So we had to break away from that. Otherwise, it would have just ended up costing us too much with our
Yeah.
servers.
By depending on Unity to do the build process around their own scenes, we don't get to control explicitly what gets included into, say, a client build and what gets included into a server. So we're dependent on Unity's own technology to do dependency calculation. So is this texture needed for this scene, or is this audio clip needed for this scene? We only can rely on Unity to say yes or no during the build process. We don't get any injection into that to say, no, actually, I don't want any textures included into the server specifically. So by ditching that paradigm and sort of inventing our own way of saving data to disk, we can skirt around that and just stream in our data and ignore Unity scene system altogether.
So
Scribble
let's
Scribble
list
MMO's
it.
asking
Like-
if we're using Unity's Collaborate.
No, we were on SVN. We've since migrated most things over to Git now with this conversion.
Never even heard of Unity Collaborate. List off like some just a couple of like implications of that, because again, I'm kind of close to this work, working closely with you guys, and there's some things in there that I'm not even super familiar with in terms of the real nuts and bolts. So like, what are some simple, clear implications of these changes we've made?
Well, one of them would be load screens. So if you hit a zone border before, because we have, say, like a 600 meg file on disk that consists of the zone that you need to go to, you have a hard zone line there. You have to load. We have to throw the load screen up, and it has to stay there until the entire scene is done loading. That includes all the visuals, audio, anything that's tied to it needs to be finished loading before we can remove the load screen. Now we can say, just stream in the collision, and when the collision's done, we can get rid of the load screen because we can keep streaming in the rest of the visuals. The game will simulate just fine while, say, this rock visual is still streaming off disk because we've got the collider all ready for it. That's sort of the fine-grained control that you get when you handle all of the streaming yourself. We can tag things and say, if the player HUD is done loading, if all of the ground collision is done loading, all the rocks, all that stuff, if that's all done loading, we're good to go and play. We can let the rest of it trickle in as necessary, or load the lowest LOD level off disk and then let the streaming system sort of pop in the higher quality stuff when it's done. We get a lot more fine-grained control over that. And that doesn't have a hard boundary at a zone border. It's just, it continues. You walk across the zone and the world is streaming around you as you move in real time, as opposed to getting these big chunk downloads or loads, I guess, not downloads, loads off
Yeah.
of your hard drive.
We're far more in control of how we pack our data now, and which
Exactly.
means that we can optimize things the way we know we need to get the most speed out of Pantheon, which we just didn't have that control before. We had to take the reins for ourselves.
So, okay, this is really exciting stuff. And we're starting to step into some of the really, really important implications of this. And I want to wait until we have some visuals to correspond to that. So let's put a pin in that track for a moment. I want to switch gears. I want to get some visuals in front of us. And I think this is a good opportunity to take a look at our terrain and what we're able to do with our terrain. We've talked a couple of times in the past about Houdini and leveraging and utilizing Houdini as a terrain solution, a biome generation solution, basically a procedural kind of suite of tools and different programs that allow us to do this kind of large scale generation of terrain and do it very quickly. We are actually using now a program called Gaia, and we made the decision to go with Gaia because, number one, in doing some research and due diligence, because any tool that you kind of devote yourself to, you need to make sure that it's going to accomplish what you need, but it's also going to do so within the resource constraints and the time frames that you're looking for. And what we found with Houdini is that obviously it's exceedingly capable of everything that we would want. But what we found with Gaia is that Gaia has extremely solid and sleek integration into Unity. There's a lot of kind of in-house expertise, especially shared between Kyle and Rob, regarding Gaia and what it's capable of. And it is also a procedural tool that allows us to do everything that we were wanting to do in Houdini, but just do it that much more quickly. Not to mention the fact that the developers of Gaia are incredible and great to work with, and so the support is there as well. Which, when you're trying to move things as quickly as we're moving things, you need good support. You need people who are responsive, ready to answer questions, and so on, so forth. So what you're going to be seeing today is the fruit of the integration of Gaia into all of these different tools and the pipeline that we've created. But I also want to make it clear that what you're also going to be seeing is the fruit of Rob and Kyle's work directly. And we've made that point before, that Unity is amazing, but a lot of what you need to move, the ground you need to move, the mountains you need to move, kind of using the expression here, to make an MMORPG is hard to encapsulate. I mean, these are the hardest, biggest games that you can make. And there are several things that we need that Unity does not have out of the box. And you're about to hear from the two people most responsible for bridging gaps and creating solutions that allow us and enable us to do the amazing things that you're going to be seeing today from them directly. So I want to kick it over to you, Rob. I'd like to start with the kind of the terrain shaping, and want to give it to you to intro this video, and then we'll take a look.
Cool. All right, thanks. Yes, I'd also like just to shout out to Adam at Procedural Worlds and the entire team there. They've been fantastic for us. They've supported us, and any questions we had, they were able to help and deliver straight away. So thank you very much to them, and it is definitely a much better fit for us. So the first video that we're going to show that we'll kick off in a second, I apologize, it's programmer art, you will see that, but it's going to show you how quickly we can convert what you guys are used to, which is like the gray box scenes, into something that's into Unity terrain that we can now sculpt and turn into something much more high fidelity. So if we want to kick off that first video, that'd be great. Hello, and welcome to this video about terrain creation in Pantheon. I'm Robert Crane, Senior Programmer and Lead Tools Programmer at Visionary Realms. When Kyle and I took on terrain streaming, we knew we needed a robust set of tools that could accelerate building worlds. So while Kyle got to work on the engine side, I busied myself writing terrain tools and pipelines to get him the data he needed. I knew our starting place was the grey box zones, which most of you have seen by now, and quickly we needed to transform them into something close to a final look. So let me show you how we did this. Here is a quick balloon mountain I put together earlier. It is just made up out of a series of standard Unity capsules, and we'll use this just for our demo. Building up a zone with primitives like this allows us to play test the zone early and iterate quickly, moving and scaling until everything feels correct. Here we are in game mode where I placed down a test first person player allowing me to check the zone. Big balloon mountain, I like it. The next step is to turn our primitive shapes into Unity terrain so we can shape it in more detail. Still really blobby, but ready for the next step. Let's now run a smooth pass over the terrain. Nice, looking like a mountain now, but we're not done yet. The next step is to run a distort pass on it to stop it looking like melted ice cream. It really just needs to look like it is 1,000 years old, so let's weather it with some erosion. Great! Lastly, we should run Gaia on it to apply a biome. Let's jump in game again and take another look. We can always use the history view to roll back and forth through our changes. Let's try a different erode setting. That's quite nice. The artist can also tweak the individual values on a modifier to tune the look the way they want. Now I know what you're thinking. Rob, what about canyons? All I did here was clone the balloon mountain, rotate it and scale it down. So let's use the add clay option on the first mountain and the remove clay option on the second mountain. Now we do the same steps as we did before. We'll run a smooth pass, a distort pass, and then follow up with erosion. Finally, we'll texture it again. Great! I think it needs some water. Awesome! Let's jump in and have a closer look. Wish I had a fishing rod. Nice day for fishing, ain't it? If we were to take that one mountain and duplicate it a few times like I've done here, we can quickly prototype a mountain range. Just add a little more detail here and there. Give it the old texture bake and boom, let's go have a look. And there you go. Obviously this is just a texture pass, the full biome has trees, grass and everything else visually. In a future video, we'll go into depth on what goes into making a full biome from start to finish. I hope you'll join us for that, and thanks for watching and helping support the development of Pantheon.
Fantastic. The real point there and the real takeaway of a video like that is to demonstrate how quickly now we're able to iterate and build out terrains in terms of the topology, the shapes, building in interesting POIs, interesting silhouettes. It's absolutely phenomenal. And one of the reasons I'm most excited about it is because I'm one of the fortunate few on the team who is able to go in and do a lot of work in our area. As I said before, I'm not an artist in the sense that I don't make the props and make the different trees and rocks and whatnot, but I like building with Legos essentially. So I'm good at putting Legos together, and I get to do a lot of scene work, and I've been able to see firsthand how quickly you can take a zone like Thrown Fast, like Aventur's Pass, Wild's End, Eastern Plains, Silent Plains, and go from the very sharp kind of angular gray box and use that as the fundamental kind of nature and layout of the terrain that we want to achieve. But then you can see how quickly, in a matter of clicks, that you now have realistic looking terrain that we're then able to, in that context and setting, place a player in, run around, check scale, check distances. We just, the support that Kyle's gotten in place to bring our actual like in-game player character with the animations and things like climbing and the various things that we are capable of in game as a player into our Unity scenes to be able to test these things in real time. The iteration, the turnaround time is by orders of magnitude increased because of these tools. And we're going to see some really, really important and cool before and after shots a little bit later in the stream to really show off kind of the implications here. But could not be more excited because of what it means for the speed with which we can start bringing this world online visually.
Really, it speaks to not only this tech stream, but the past few that we've had, past, I don't know, a year and a half or so. They've all been focused on enabling designers, be it ability systems that are graph controlled by designers, or letting a designer get in here and paint and sculpt and place objects in the world without worrying about the performance implications and does it go in this tile or any of that kind of connecting zones together with invisible, it's just, you don't think about it anymore. You load the whole continent, you drop stuff on it, and you go.
And you go. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention was that that video was not sped up at all. The time that it took to erode or distort or do any of those things, you actually saw it in real time. So that's what Chris is working with when he's working on his zones, is that speed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
that's
that's
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you're good. You're good.
I was just going to ask a question coming from chat. Just in terms of the erode, when it's performed, is it different every time, or are you always going to get kind of the same erosion?
The erode settings are fully tweakable, but it's all based on a seed, so a seed value. So if that seed value doesn't change, you would get the same value, but usually it's a randomized seed to get different results.
But just to clarify that a little bit further, like Rob said, all of the settings are tweakable. So with the designer coming in and looking at the zone, they're taking into account, what's the age of the zone, what's the climate here, what's the biome supposed to be, and so are we looking at thousands of years of erosion? Are we looking at relatively short amount of time? So it is randomly seeded, but it also has enough parameters where we can shape it to fit the area that we're looking at.
And nor does that output the final thing that we have either. So this is a rapid iteration tool, but it doesn't remove the fact that a designer can still get in there and do stuff by hand.
Yeah, that's one of the key differences between a Houdini pipeline and our pipeline is with Houdini, we're dependent completely on the full rendering path. So even if it's the smallest little tweak that you wanted to make, we would have to send the entirety of everything back through the full process to get a new output. Whereas now it is as agile as it could possibly be. You can bake everything out, you can build everything out, you leverage the procedural tools and things like we just saw, but then an artist, a world builder can go in and make those small hand adjustments as needed. And that's been our goal from the beginning, because we don't want procedurally generated POIs. We want our POIs to be handcrafted. We want them to be set up in specific ways for specific purposes, and this affords us the full freedom and support to do that.
I really kind of want to underscore your point there, because there are games out there that do completely procedural generated universes, and it works in some situations. But I challenge you to find a completely procedurally generated world or even zone that is as realistic or as engaging as a handmade one. It's you still want handmade in the end.
Mhm.
Procedure stuff works for certain respects, but yeah, it's nice to have that handmade touch as well. We do. I don't want to take all the time with these questions, but since we were speaking about Houdini as well, a question did pop up that was asking if the topography of King's Reach map, map that we put out a while ago, has that changed? Was a switch over to our current tools and pipeline?
Nope. And in a little bit later in the stream, I'll put some visuals to that. Nope.
Perfect.
Yeah, you'll see some before and afters, right?
Yep. Cool. I think we have another video from Rob. So we've looked at the terrain sculpting and how quickly we can. I mean, I got to just say too, the fact that you can take, he was using, like you said, this programmer already using cylinders in these or capsules in these primitive shapes, but we can do anything. We can literally take anything, any object, any topography, any geometry we want, complex, simple, whatever it is, and do exactly that. We can dip it into the terrain and we can build clay around it, or we can take clay out based on the contour of that. And so the degree of freedom and creativity that it provides us in getting our terrain in shape quickly to kind of capture what we're looking for, it's fantastic. It's really exciting. So I will kick it back to you, Rob, and we can take a look at this next video.
All right, thanks, Chris. Well, the second video that I put together is to do with our cave systems. And it's not the only way that we are creating caves, but it's certainly a step in the right direction of being able to get the tools in place for designers to rapidly iterate on caves and dungeons, because they play a huge part in Pantheon. To get the tools into their hands so we can iterate very quickly and get gameplay elements in and test them just as quick as we can. So let's play the second video and you'll get an idea. Hello again, Robert Crane here. Let's talk about caves. Every good RPG has lots of caves, but getting a good structure for caves can sometimes be very time consuming. Our design team needs to be able to quickly mock up a cave design to see if it will fit their needs. So I knew I had to find a solution that allowed them to try different designs without having long waits. Here is one approach on how we design our caves. First, we start off with a room like this. Now, I'm not an artist, so forgive my low polygon room. It will serve the purpose of this demonstration, but it certainly doesn't have to be this generic. Now here comes the magic. If we place a couple of them together like so, and then run the cave cutter process on them, You can see that they now join each other. So, through a process of duplicating, moving, rotating, scaling rooms, we can put together very complex cave systems. Once the cave design is locked down, artists can come in and set dress the caves to finish the look. The only thing left for this test cave is a way in. Let's place another cave piece in the front leading to outside. And it doesn't have to just be one type of mesh. Here's a rock. All we need to do is reverse the mesh, turn it into a rune. Putting two of these rocks together and then running the cave cutter will turn it into one big rune. If we stick it into one of our walls and carve the caves again, it now becomes part of the cave. Once we save this and it goes through our automated build pipeline, we end up with this. Add a little rock entrance to the front and we have a nice little cave. And that's one way how caves are built in Pantheon. Thanks again for watching. Onward and upward.
Awesome. So the point there again was to showcase some of what this conversion has allowed us to create, put together for the sake of expediting world creation tools. I think Kyle said it really well. You know, the more we can, as we've said so many times over, everything we do is steeped in meaning and purpose when it comes to the game, meaning the lore of the world, the who, what, where, when, why, the story that drives everything, so that we're always having a truly immersive world and a truly immersive experience in mind. And so with the lore, with the concept art that is kind of steeped in and birthed out of the lore, we are building these tools to enable world builders and designers to harness the ability to generate these areas and create these places extremely quickly. And what's so beautiful about this is, rewind, a year, certainly 2 years ago or so, the turnaround time that it took for us to place something in the game and then actually get into that area in a client with a character and play it and experience it was sometimes days. Whereas now, all that we need to actually test and prove out and do the kind of iterations you do when you're creating a game, we're able to do it now within Unity, with our own code kind of being funneled into the editor and our player character. And so all of the play testing to spot check and check scale and check distances and check density and everything else we are able to do as we're working on these areas. So it's a huge showcase And again, my hat's off to Rob specifically for the incredible work that he's done to get these tools where they're at and as quickly and as robust as they are. I mean, it's a really great thing. So thank you, Rob, for that. It's fantastic. Let's
Before we move on,
Yeah.
just really quickly in that vein, Naos 245 is asking if the quickness that we now have with these tools, does that change the timeline, the projected timeline, or was this always sort of part of the plan?
I think that we have surpassed our expectations on how quickly we're able to develop what we need to develop with these tools. It's no secret that we have a lot of world to build. And the quicker we can do that, the quicker we can get to the finish line. So I'm not going to make any, kind of direct statements on what this does as far as shaving timelines, except to say that it has exceeded our expectation substantially in terms of how quickly we can move our world. So it's a big deal. Any other quick questions on this front?
If they are, they haven't been fed to me, but we'll just blame Kilson. No, actually, he has tossed me a couple. Are there plans to come up with a tool to create NPC/character assets quickly as well?
Not through the same kind of methods. They're very different things, and we do have some plans, I guess you could say, in how we can certain things we can do to expedite some of that process. But it's not going to be like this. There's not a tool that allows you to now. Once we have an NPC or just a character model that we like, for example, there's a lot we can do to create significant and meaningful variations in that, and those things can certainly be expedited and tooled out in a way that helps us build those out further. But when it comes to generating the kind of source model for these things, you're not going to see a tool yet that can do that, or at least that we would be capable of utilizing.
That's a difficult problem even for skilled artists. Organic modeling and humanoid style modeling, or even any kind of skinned mesh rigging, animating, it's not something that a designer can really effectively do the same.
Or you wouldn't want
it. Yeah.
a designer trying to do something like that. Yeah. Any other questions on that front?
Let's keep moving on.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of jump back to a little bit of what Kyle was discussing in the beginning and take a look at the performance improvements and kind of basically the staging of what the architecture does for us in terms of our streaming technology. So we've heard us talk about terrain streaming. I do want to make the point, and Kyle, you can drive this home, but it's not just terrain streaming or world streaming. This is actually a holistic streaming technology. So whether we're talking about terrain, whether we're talking about trees, rocks, you name it, this streaming tech is kind of fundamental and touches all of those things. So I'm excited. We're going to try something a little different this time. Kyle's going to be live streaming here. We did some pre-recorded videos with Rob, but Kyle, I think it's time for you to
swap me in. This part's going to get pretty technical, potentially. So this is in the editor, consuming some of the built data that CP and Tim have been working on. This is thrown fast, converted over as we have it now. Not all the assets have been converted to HDRP yet, so we're only working with what we have so far and what have been scattered in the tools, right? Let's see here. So I'm going to do my best to just give a sort of overview of how this tech works to get you in the mindset to understand where some of the other stuff comes in. So this is game view on the right, sort of an editor scene view on the left. I'm going to zoom out, and you can see how much of the world we're actually pulling in around a player. It's quite substantial. I'm going to overlay some gizmos. That little gizmo in the very center there, the little arrows, that's where our player is. You can see the streamer has some information that it gives us these yellow tiles. Well, actually, let me zoom out even more. So this is all of a continent. This is King's Reach here. The empty cells out here are not loaded cells. And as you move closer and closer to the player, you'll see these blue cells and some yellow cells and some green cells. And these are level of detail of that individual cell. So green indicates the highest quality. That's what we're standing on here. And it'll be whatever you're standing on in the closest 3 tiles will be as high quality as we can deliver to you. So the streaming tech is sort of, it's a level of detail and streamer combined into one sort of thing. It was one of the biggest CPU drains that we had previously, was just leveraging Unity's own level of detail systems. In Fairtale, it took almost 6 milliseconds of CPU time just to calculate every frame what this tree's quality should be, for example. There was just so many objects that were trying to push through it that it falls apart. So one of the big wins we get here is this is all built on Unity's newer tech, the job system and burst compiler, the entire thing. So we get amazing performance from the streaming, and for almost free, we get level of detail added in a way that you couldn't really do even before, because we can just stream the level of detail required off of disk. So if I look for the same, does that make sense so far?
It sounded good to me.
Okay. So I'm going to try and get sort of a similar-ish view from the in-game camera over here. Zoom out a little bit in the editor. And if I move, you can see the colors change. As the player camera walks across the world, you can see the quality would change in this tile here, for example. This is changing from the highest quality to level of detail 1 as I move left and right. Right, so now we're on level of detail 1. Get a little bit closer to this tile. Now we're on level of detail 0. You can see the triangle counts for log 0 over 100,000 triangles. As we move away, we can drop those down to about 5,000 to 6,000 triangles. So that's the idea. That's just the individual terrain tile, but every single object that exists on these tiles can optionally have our custom level of detail component added to them and get callbacks about, should I be the highest quality right now? Should I be the lowest, or should I unload myself? We sort of hand that off to the tech, and it just figures it out. So we've completely eliminated Unity's level of detail system and implemented sort of our own scene technology at the same time. It's a double win there. All right, so the next big thing, this is only scratching the surface, I should say. So this is going to get even more technical. A game has sort of 2 distinct parts generally. That's not always thought of this way, depending on how big of a game you're making. But especially in a networking game, you're going to want to think about this at some point. You've got the simulation and you've got the rendering. And generally in Unity, those 2 things are very tightly coupled together, meaning that you've got, say, like a game object here, and it's got a renderer, and it's got a mesh, and maybe it's got a collider. So that's coupling dependencies there. A collider is part of a simulation. You can't see a collider. It's only necessary to make the player smash into it. The other part of that is the rendering, which is, say, the mesh renderer, the textures, all of that kind of stuff. What we do now in our build process is split those explicitly. So our server, for example, if I can find, here's a tile. On our server, we only have to couple data that's required for the simulation to work. That was what I was getting at before with the build stripping, or Rob mentioned, and then we expanded on a bit. With the build stripping is we can now explicitly say, I want these assets included with the server, and these assets are specifically collision, navigation, that kind of stuff. And I want to exclude everything else from the server. Or for the client, I want to include all the collision and navigation, but I also want to include all of the rendering data as well. And because it's decoupled like that, one second. Where's my gizmo? I guess I'll just do it here. I can raise this to show an example. I just lifted the simulation part of the game 500 units into the air to give you an example. This is sort of the trace outline of everything necessary to make the game run without rendering, right? Below it, if I look down below, you still see the terrain down there. Turn the gizmos off. The terrain's still there, visually rendering, but I would fall through it now if I were to be standing on that spot with a player. The importance of that is we can tag just the collision here as necessary to load. And if we get to a situation where we're in a green zone, if I go back to the top view, say a player is in this spot right here, but we haven't finished loading the collision, the necessary data to simulate this cell properly, we can dynamically just splash up a load screen and say, hang on, you're not ready to actually play in this part yet. Now, that normally doesn't matter because you're just walking around the world naturally. So if a blue cell pops up, we're streaming in the collision already, and it's not necessary, it's not required for gameplay when it's on a blue cell. It is actually required for gameplay on a yellow cell because an NPC might need to navigate around on it. So if somehow you get, say, summoned across the world, or you jump in a portal, and all of a sudden the streamer detects that you have teleported from the top right area of Thronefast down into southern AVP or the Silent Plains or something way down here, it will recognize that, oh my god, a whole bunch of required for gameplay stuff just got requested off disk, and I don't have any of it yet. I need to show a load screen for a second. So normal case to case, just walking around the world naturally, you'd see no load screens ever because things get buffered in a bubble around you before they're really necessary. But in the extreme case of a big teleport, you will see that load screen.
Yeah, on that point, I was just going to say that it means that also that if you're not up to going to Silent Plains or one of those other zones yet, there's no reason why you should need to download that at the start. So this will all be streamed when you need it at that time, and which means it's much smaller patch sizes, much smaller executables, and just get fed the data when you need it.
Yep. And it also means that we can update a rock, which is not necessary for gameplay, right? The visual aspect of a rock can be updated separately from the simulation aspect of a rock. And we can deliver you that updated mesh without having to compromise the integrity of the simulation of the game.
So I think this is a good opportunity to also make the kind of clarify the fact that what this allows us to do now is move away from a zoned world, a fully zoned world. And in fact, that is what we are doing. We will still have zone lines most likely for dedicated dungeons because there's a few reasons for that. But in wanting Pantheon to be as immersive as possible and to really capture that feeling of freedom and adventure, and zone worlds just don't support that. When I can't run over that mountain and go wherever that's going to take me, I don't really feel like I'm fully immersed in an adventure and have a as full of possible of freedom. So whether it's running across King's Reach, as you see here, over mountain peaks, wherever you want to go, or whether it's running towards the ocean and just swimming out as far as you can go, the overland world will be seamless, and cannot express how excited we are about that.
Yep, full continent. There's no fundamental reason that this needs to be the size that it is. We chose this because it encapsulated all of King's Reach and gave us ample room to expand around the borders as well. It was arbitrary. We can expand this to be multiple continents, or we're not going to, but the idea is the tech is not limited in world scale. It streams off disk on demand.
And because of each tile has got its own LOD levels, it means that not that we've done it yet, but we're very close to rendering what you've seen in Fairthal before, possibly in every tile. So the density of the rendering that we'll be able to get away with is going to be that much higher with our new system than we could ever possibly do before.
One of the one sec, let me pull. just grab this guy again, actually. So going back to the idea of decoupling visuals from the simulation again, well, actually, step back. So why is Unity generally considered bad for large open worlds? It's because game objects are sort of heavy. One of the reasons that we needed to address this tech ourselves is because we wanted to, wherever possible, avoid having game objects. And that comes down to how we're saving our data on disk in that tile format. This is an example of whatever tile 829 is. I don't actually know. This is all of the assets that exist on that tile. So there's some cave meshes. Here's a sapling tree, a medium tree. There's 63 instances of this one, 69 instances of this one. We're saving data in a way that is GPU friendly. So if I expand one of these out, this is a 4x4 matrix of the position, rotation, and scale that makes up this one instance of this sapling. And what we're trying to do is keep all of our data in a GPU friendly format and just upload that directly. We can just indirectly render everything as necessary. Because we've decoupled visuals from collision, we don't have a dependency on how we render an object. We can just skirt around the idea of even using game objects for 80 to 90% of the things that we render in a scene, just rendering them and loading it straight off disk linearly. No data transformations have to happen. Upload directly to the GPU and it renders. That's going to be humongous for performance in an open world game. And it's something that Unity lacks sorely.
Before anyone asks too, that is the lowest LOD level you're seeing there of the trees. We just
Yes,
render
this is
everything in low LOD in Unity Editor just for speed reasons.
What you're seeing
that's not
here is
fun.
actually what designers would work with. This is the sculptable terrain. You can place objects in here. This is the tools, right? And then this goes through a bake process and outputs these kinds of scriptable objects for us that contains all of the necessary data to render a given tile.
Yes, that was one of the longest things that we had to do, is create a build pipeline that can ingest anything that you put into a Unity scene and split it up into these tiles and LOD levels and feed that data to a streamable source that then Kyle's engine can take and render at high speed.
Exactly. We're doing all the slowness over in the tools and then letting the build pipeline output highly optimized assets for us to consume in a streamable way. I think that's about all I got for the streaming tech, at least.
I think that was a great explanation. Lots of dense information, but I love that we got to have the visual to go along with it. And nice job on the live stream in there.
Thanks. I hope we can do more live stuff. I think it's a little more engaging. If you get an idea in your head, you can just jump over to it really quick. It's nice.
Yeah, agreed.
So
Cool.
before we wrap things up, I think we have, instead of patch notes, I think we have tech notes this week, unless I'm mistaken.
Yep. So they are still patch notes, but this is coming direct from our programmers. Some of the additional things they've been working on and have developed and gotten in that they didn't cover during their presentation earlier. So take it away, guys.
Yeah, so I don't know if you noticed in the live stream, but we've moved away from the 2019 or the LTS release stream of Unity altogether. We're on the latest cutting edge 2021 beta. We're actually 2 betas behind now, but we're on the latest and greatest Unity edition now for all the HDRP improvements and stuff like that. But one of the big things that we've implemented is just straight up code stripping. So any server specific code is now completely removed and decoupled from the client. It gives us a nice, clean separation between what is authoritative, required for simulation stuff, and client UI rendering, just garbage, things like that. But we've also switched the client to compiling to IL2CPP, which involved some plugin purging and that kind of stuff. But we're at a nice, clean slate. So all of our client code now compiles directly to C++ and gets obfuscated in the process. So it's going to be much, much harder to decompile any of the builds. And even if you can decompile it, again, we've got the code stripping in. So a lot of the more sensitive server-specific formulas and combat methods that run server only are just completely removed from the client. So less bloat there. Moving to HDRP, we got a humongous, I don't even know how to quantify this really, but we've switched all of our shader usage to native HDRP lit, unlit, tree rendering, that kind of stuff. We're using more of Unity's native shaders as a base. Previously, we had, I want to say 280 unique shaders plus instance variants and things like that, compiled definition variants that get generated from the build process. There are thousands of shaders used in different areas of the game. And that's been boiled down to, I don't know, like 7 or 8 now. So huge wins there in terms of memory usage. We don't have to load all those up into the GPU. We don't got to build and strip variants of them at compile time, all that stuff.
It's all the compatibility breaking issues that we had.
Oh, God, yeah. So the only way that you could get the built-in renderer previously looking great and performing well was a lot of custom stuff. And that's sort of what Rob is getting at there, is that ties you to certain editions of Unity that support features or things that you might be dependent on. And that was a huge problem for us. It was a struggle to update Unity at all. And now we're totally comfortable on the latest bleeding edge of Unity. We're not depending on how something was custom integrated or any kind of tech like that. It's a lot more native, just out of the box support for certain tools now. So, okay. Could you actually flip back to my screen really quick? One of the things that we're leveraging now is this dedicated server build target in the latest beta. In addition to all of the custom build stuff that we can now do for our servers and our zones, because we control the entire pipeline, Unity also implemented this build target called dedicated server in the latest beta, which adds to their side, like the Unity's build side of build stripping. So with the changes to how we pack our zones and this new dedicated server build target, our zones in some cases are using 5 or 6 times less memory than they were before, which means we can pack more on a single box, support more players, all of that good stuff. That's a massive win that was sort of out of the blue. I wasn't actually following that, and we got the upgrade, and it all just kind of worked, and it was great. That's a new thing that we're also using there. So also up here, we're leveraging all of their play mode optimizations now. So all of our projects, be it the game assets, the world terrain, or this main code project that consumes all the built assets, all have full interplay mode options enabled, meaning that we don't have to do a domain reload and we don't have to do a scene reload when you hit play. That means even on Joppa's lower spec PC than I have, he can interplay mode in that massive terrain scene in a matter of seconds, whereas
like a second or two.
Yeah, it's fast, right? So compare that to, say, AVP in the old style. You would hit play, and depending on your computer power, you could be sitting there for 30 seconds to a minute just waiting for the game to start. That kind of iteration time is, it's just, it breaks your concentration every single time. So that's completely gone now.
It used to take, sometimes used to take 3 minutes just to load the scene in the start, not even pressing play yet, just
like
getting the
booting
scene
Unity
loaded.
up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when you start adding that up through the course of a day, through the course of a week, a month, all of the seconds and minutes that you spend literally just waiting for something to load, something to render, something to export, something to build, it really, really adds up. And the amount of efficiency that we've gained through getting those seconds and minutes back is pretty astounding.
Not to mention just the frustration level that it adds to as well, just having to wait for things. Just alleviates that frustration now.
You can finally patch those holes in your wall, Rob, not keep adding to them. Yeah.
I'll find another reason.
So yeah, there's been a lot of smaller but still extremely significant changes that we've been able to make due to the architecture changes.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for that, Kyle. We are getting short on time, but we do have one more goodie for you before we go. Chris, I think we have some before and afters, don't we?
Yeah. So, like I said at the beginning, this is our part one of a two-part series. Today, we've focused obviously very heavily on the tech, on the tools, but all of this, we're making a game here, and we're making a game world that we want to be immersive and beautiful. And the great thing about the HDRP conversion is that not only have we been able to incorporate all of these amazing tools, but there's a lot that comes with HDRP in terms of just the visual fidelity and no more gray box. That is just a very, very significant milestone for us, and I know that it is as meaningful to so many of you as it is to us to see us reach that stage. So what we want to end on today as kind of a little bit of a teaser for what we're going to kind of douse you in part two is some early kind of before and after visuals of some of our zones in their gray box state, which most of you have seen, and now in their HDRP state, utilizing these terrain tools and just with a little dusting of some of the HDRP goodness. By no means is this fully dialed in. So when we talk about lighting, when we talk about the atmospheric effects and the different just all the little bells and whistles, part two. That's part two. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start. We're going to show a series of before shots. We'll go ahead and bring up the first shot now. I know that everyone is really sad to see this go.
Feel like we need some violin music.
Yeah, I did say, I think it was in the VIP community, our testers, but I did say, like, enjoy it while it lasts. Like there is something about moving away from this that will become more and more nostalgic someday. But all right, now let's see HDRP. Same shot. You can just cycle kind of back and forth to see. This is one section of Avendir's Pass, and you can see what we've said from the beginning, that the gray box geometry is not placeholder. I mean, it is placeholder, but it's not throwaway. It has been establishing the silhouette and the topology, and it's been amazing utilizing these tools because it's allowed us, especially in these zones that have been developed and we've built content and gameplay, thoroughly within, that we can snugly kind of convert this terrain and even, do some additional shaping on it without losing any of that layout information. All right, let's go to the next shot. So this is looking now towards Thronefast. Still in Avendir's Pass, but looking back towards Thronefast, and now we'll see it in HDRP. And you can see there, straight shot in through the gate into the city, and just really wanting to kind of, drive home the fact that as a seamless world now, you're looking all the way from NAVP into and onto the very city of Thronefast itself, and getting a little taste of our kind of earlier morning time of day. That's something we'll talk about in more detail in part two. All of the time of day goodness that we get with HDRP and how much more easily now we'll be able to move towards setting up a true day-night system. All right, let's go next shot. This was actually, some of you may have seen this. This is what we used for our promo shot, but let's go ahead and move to shot two. And then lastly, the final shot, we're going to circle all the way back to that question earlier on that was asked, have we maintained the actual layout of things with this conversion? Have we lost that layout. And this this final before and after is an overland shot showing the entirety of Avenger's Pass and Throne Fast seamlessly, loaded together. Let's go ahead and move to that shot. And this is in its gray box state. And now we'll show the HDRP.
And how long do you think it took you to go from grey box to that, Chris?
So I would say now, after having kind of gotten used to the workflow, this would probably take a day for this entire area, both of these zones together, to get it to this stage. Could do it in a day. And we will I love this shot in HDRP because you can see some of the coastline in some of the areas. We've intentionally cut off a little bit around the side. Again, we're gonna douse you with this in part 2. But when you start really taking in the water and the interplay between the terrain and the water and the seamless nature now of the world, it's very exciting. And we'll leave you with this final shot. Just a different vantage point, but this is one of the peaks inside of Avenger's Pass. You're looking out over Avenger's Pass into what used to be the zone of Throne Fast, which is now just that part of the continent, even seeing beyond that into the ocean and further beyond. And the amazing thing is you could set off running from right here and run all the way out, maybe even hop in a ship and sail off into the distance as far as you would want to go. And when we say that Pantheon is going to be next level in its embrace and how deeply we're diving into creating a truly immersive adventure-based MMORPG experience, we mean it. And everything we're doing is for the purpose of making sure that this world supports that. So I know it's going to be hard to wait, but we do have a round 2 coming up, and we will look forward to that along with you.
Thanks, Chris. And thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Rob, for coming on tonight and showing everything and talking about HDRP, the pipeline, all of the tools. I think I can speak for the community here when they say we really appreciate it. Lots of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, no worries. It's always fun.
You're very welcome.
And just a reminder to all of you out there that Pantheon is made possible by your pledges. If you like what you've seen tonight and want to support the game and its developers, head on over to pantheonmmo.com, hit that pledge button. There's lots of different options for all different budgets and every type of gamer. And while you are there, dun, 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 you will notice today that there is now a Refer a Friend program available. There is a link right on that pledge button. You can also just go to pantheonmmo.com/RAF and read about the Refer a Friend program, where you will earn rewards as you recruit your friends to play Pantheon. Also, there are still investment opportunities if you are an accredited investor and would like to talk. Drop us a line at contact@visionaryrealms.com. I'd like to thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for your support. Have a great night.
See you soon.